Hey, good people. Thank you for joining another Tuesday Night Maximize. I appreciate you stopping by just to be a part of what we are presenting on tonight. And I pray that you're blessed. I pray that you're edified and perfected as a result of tonight's segment. Listen, do me a favor. If you're watching us live on YouTube, smash that subscribe button to make sure that you are plugged into our virtual community that side and that you don't miss anything that we have going on that platform. If you're watching us live via Facebook, like, tag, and share. Like, tag, and share, and help us get this before as many people that you know and have influence over as possible. Listen, we're in part two of a teaching that we started on last week entitled The Grace of God, or Living by the Grace of God. And we started last week by laying the foundation and gave a working definition of the grace of God. It is defined as such: God's divine influence imparted into us to accomplish, manifest, or experience something that will never be a reality in our own strength and ability. When the grace of God is imparted into your life, when you carry a measure, or when you flow in the grace of God, you're flowing in a measure of God himself that divinely influences you to accomplish, manifest, and or experience something that would never be a reality in your own strength and ability. God's divine influence will either manifest on your behalf or will manifest through you to accomplish something that exceeds your ability. It either works for you or it works through you. And sometimes it can work simultaneously. It'll be working on your behalf and it'll be working through you to bring about that thing that is far beyond anything that you could ask or think. I want to direct your attention to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. This is one of Paul's writings. Matter of fact, his second letter to the church of Corinth, and he's really addressing some things, but he's being very transparent concerning a struggle or issue or a vexation in his own life that he really needed some intervention on. He had beseeched the Lord 3 times concerning this thorn in his flesh. And this is what the Lord responded to Paul's request by saying, "My grace is sufficient for thee. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will glory in my infirmity." Paul said, I'll glory in my infirmities. Why? Because when I glory in my infirmities, the power of Christ will rest upon me. When he tells Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you," that word grace in this context comes from the Greek word charis, and it means divine influence and enablement. He says, "Paul, I cannot oblige you. I cannot grant you this request because where you find yourself is a perfect and prime opportunity for me to show myself strong on your behalf. So versus taking this thorn, this vexation, this issue away from you, I'm going to leave it there, but I'm going to show myself strong by divinely influencing you and enabling you to continue to do what I've called you to do with this thing present." He said, "My grace, my divine influence, my divine enablement is sufficient for you." It's enough. When something is sufficient, that means it is enough. It by itself and independent of any help or partnership is able to get it done. My grace, my divine influence, my divine enablement is enough for you, for thee, thine own, for you. He's basically saying this measure of grace, this measure of divine influence, this measure of divine enablement that I'm making accessible to you, that I'm bestowing upon you, Paul, I'm giving you permission to own it. This measure of me, I'm trusting you with it. I'm vesting it in you, and I'm trusting you with it, and I give you permission to own it. This would suggest that the grace that was on Paul's life was specific to his assignment. When God releases a measure of grace on your life, it is specific for what he has called you and thrust you to do in the earth. All right. Paul was dealing with opposition personally, publicly, and spiritually. And it was vexing him. It was overwhelming him to a point where he described it as a thorn. He was describing it as a vexation in his flesh. And three times he asked the Father to remove this. But the Father responds by saying, number one, my divine influence on your life and my divine enablement in your life will suffice. My grace will suffice. How will it suffice, Paul? Because it's my grace. It's a measure of me, and independently, it's enough for you and what I expect of you. Whenever God invests a measure of himself in us, it's always going to be sufficient for us, and it's going to be sufficient for what God expects of us. Paul said, okay, cool. You're not going to take it from me. I'm being given a greater measure of you to continue on in what you've called me to do. Paul said, therefore, verse 10, he said, therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecution, and distress for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, I am strong. So, Lord, if you're not taking it, that means when I'm at the end of me, when I'm at my weakest, that's when your strength starts. You know, saints, when you begin to embrace God's grace, your perspective of opposition and adversity changes. It automatically changes. Maybe that thing looks more detrimental than it really is. Maybe it looks more intense or feels more intense than what it really is, because you haven't embraced God's grace. Because it's impossible to embrace the grace of God, his divine influence and his divine enablement, and your perspective about opposition and adversity stay the same. All right, there's a robustness that comes over you. There's a courage, there's a strength, there's a girth, a weightiness that comes upon you. Paul literally said, I get happy when I know I'm no match for what I'm up against. This is powerful, because at that point, the strength and ability that's in me, that's been given by God, is activated. A strength and an ability that's beyond me begins to manifest when I'm up against something that I'm no match for. He said, I welcome insults, offenses. I welcome distress, adversity, trouble, pain. I welcome persecution. That's the lies, the criticism, the speculation, the gossip, the slander, the assassinations of your character, the attacks on your name. He said, I welcome difficulties. Those are conditions and the state of affairs that are almost beyond your ability to even deal with. Can I help you with this? Saints of God, it's in the hard places where grace to break through becomes most accessible. It's in the hard places where grace to break through is the most accessible. I know you thought you've come to the end of your rope, but actually you're in a good spot because you're coming to the end of you. And when you come to the end of you, you are just on the cusp. You're on the brink of tapping into a breakthrough grace that's accessible for you to make it through what you're facing. Okay? You become the most stable version of yourself when you live your life dependent on the grace of God. Now, I don't know who this is for, but I'm going to tag it like this. It's for whoever will catch it by way of the Spirit. Grace is about to prevail in your life like never before. I know you thought it was going to be finances. I know you thought it was going to be increase, overflow, more than enough. But the Lord says grace is about to prevail in your life. And people are going to ask you, how did you make it? How did you do it? How are you still here? How did you get out of that? How did you come from under that? How do you make it through what you are facing? How are you able to navigate through this? Paul said, look, I've learned to welcome what most people avoid. I learned to smile at what most people cry over. I embrace what breaks most people. I press through what many people quit from. And this is the mindset of an overcomer. This is the mindset of one who has embraced the grace of God and understands that, look, when I'm faced with something that is beyond me, that's the prime opportunity that God is setting up to display his strength and ability on my behalf. These things activate a measure of God in you. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you, saints of God? It makes up the difference when you're short. It fills every void when you're empty. It straightens every crooked thing when you are off. It brings low every mountain when you are overwhelmed. His grace proved to be sufficient when Paul came to the end of himself. And I want to say this. I want to say this with some apostolic aggression. You will encounter the sufficiency of God when you experience the end of yourself. You will encounter the sufficiency of God when you experience the end of yourself. More often than not, we find ourselves leaning towards, gravitating to, selecting, choosing, and opting for scenarios and situations and things that align with our capacity and our ability, when God says, no, 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 no. What I have for you, what I've ordained, what I've destined for you, it goes far beyond your capacity. But I need you to marry a mindset that what I'm going to bestow upon you that may not be present now is going to be sufficient for what I want to bring you into, what I want to provide for you, what I want to manifest through you, in you, and for you. But you got to understand that you've got to come to the end of you. Got to come to the end of you. I don't know who's on the verge. I don't know who's on the edge. I don't know who's on the fence right now, but God told me to tell you that his grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. His grace will suffice, because independently, it's enough for you and what God expects from you. His divine influence on your life, his divine enablement in your life. I don't know what's vexing you. I don't know what's overwhelming you. I don't know what's weighing on you, but let it be a reminder that these are the situations that God is brooding over the earth, looking for opportunities to show himself strong in. It says that the eyes of the Lord go to and fro, seeking and searching, looking for, scanning for opportunities to show himself strong on the behalf of those whose heart is turned towards him, those who love him and those whose heart is turned towards him. God's his grace is either going to work for us or it's going to work through us. All right. It's either going to work for us or it's going to work through us. And I want you to understand that a life well lived is a life that is lived where you always leave room for God's grace. Always leave room for God's grace. I don't care how gifted, how anointed you may be or may become. It's the grace of God that divinely enables you. Okay, it always has been and always will be a measure of God's endowment, a grace that he placed upon us that will enable us. That's why we're told in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, to seek grace. To seek grace. He says, let us therefore come boldly before the throne of grace, the place where grace resides, where grace originates, where grace emanates, where grace is dispensed. He said, come boldly to that throne and allow God to release, to relinquish, to bestow upon you mercy and grace that will help you in times of need. In that time of need, it's not a time to be crying and whining and complaining and looking for a co-defendant or a rappy, someone to go on this journey, this woe is me journey with you. No, it's a time for you to begin to approach where grace originates, that way you'll get a measure of it along with mercy, and you'll find help for that time of need. Stable living consists of a healthy confidence in your ability while dependent on God's grace to enable you to manifest it. I'm not telling you to walk around and don't have any confidence. I'm not telling you to walk around and don't have any type of swag about yourself or about yourself. No, we should be confident. We should be we should think highly of ourselves. The Bible says that we shouldn't think more highly of ourselves. Okay, it never says we shouldn't think highly of ourselves. It said we shouldn't think more highly of ourselves. You know, don't spend your days mastering life where you are in the driver's seat and the Father is riding shotgun. Okay, we talked about last week being intentional with needing God, and needing God situationally. Okay, it's time to get out of the mindset that I'm only going to invite God in when I need him. You should live in need of him. That way he'll never have to be invited. You live from a place of dependency. You live from a place of dependency. If you want to stay plugged into God's supernatural, God's divine enablement, his divine influence, his divine ability, then you have to live from a place of needing him on a consistent basis. You can't trust in yourself. You can't depend on yourself. You can't put too much stock in yourself because, believe it or not, we just don't have the capacity to handle things that are coming at us in this day and time apart from the grace of God. We're going to do a bit of review. Then we're going to bring this thing to a close. There's a big difference between needing God and acknowledging that you need him. Okay. Those are two types of dependency. Okay. Needing God is situational. Knowing you need God is intentional. It's a big difference. The situational need for God and his intervention is only relevant when you have lack, or when there's inadequacy, or when there is desperation. It's normally connected to our heart posture. And there's some pride there, because in these instances, you don't want to relinquish your need for control of everything pertaining to your life. Okay. When we lose our life, we gain life. And sometimes we have a warped perspective of what losing our life is. When we give our life, when we yield our life, when we relinquish control, when we relinquish the stern wheel and the reins of our life, we're forfeiting our life, okay, to gain life. A life that the Father has ordained. And connected to that ordination of the Father's will concerning our life are promises, to never leave us nor forsake us, to supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory, to love us, to protect us, that no hurt, harm, or danger will come near us. There's a plethora of promises connected to a life that is intentionally yielded to God. And yielded, and tonight I want to look at yielded from a standpoint of yielded in a realm of dependency, needing God and acknowledging that you need God, being intentional about it. When you're intentional about your need for God, your dependence on the Father keeps his ability in the forefront of your thinking. There's nothing more confirming. There's nothing more comforting. There's nothing more peaceful than acknowledging and living from a place of knowing that the one that I'm depending on doesn't have the capacity to fail me. Your dependence on the Father keeps his ability at the forefront of your thinking, and it causes you to live totally, 100% completely reliant on him. The same Paul said in 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, verse 5, he says, not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. We arrive because of him. We're competent because of him. Our ability is ample and fit enough because of him. How is it because of him? Because when we come to the end of us, it prompts him to give us a measure of him. All right. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. The NIV reads this way: not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. The word competence means ability to do something successfully and efficiently. When you're doing things in you, it's just a matter of time before you get tired and you reach a point called exhaustion, because you're exerting human energy, human effort, human strength, human wisdom, I'm plugging the Liberty Mutual commercial. You're exerting human strength, human ability, human wisdom, human resources, and it's only a matter of time before you are tired and exhausted. But when you're flowing in the grace of God, your strength is on reserve. Your strength is on pause, and you're flowing in All of that flow comes from God. You're flowing in his strength. You're flowing in his wisdom. You're flowing in his ability. He makes you competent. He gives you the ability to do something successfully and efficiently. You're getting it done, consuming, burning, utilizing the least amount of resources, but have the same amount of effectiveness. Are you following me? The Passion Translation of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5 says, yet we don't see ourselves as capable. We don't see ourselves as capable enough to do anything in our own strength. See, sometimes we get too confident. We get too sure of ourselves, and we see ourselves as capable enough without God. But Paul says, no, yet we don't see ourselves as capable enough to do anything. We can't do nothing in our own strength. Even our strength needs his strength. For our true competence flows from God's empowering presence. What do you think his empowering presence is? It's his grace. It's his grace. His grace is his empowering presence. And it makes us competent. It gives us the ability to do things successfully and efficiently. Acts chapter 17, verse 28 says, for in him we live, move, and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Since we are his offspring, we have access. We have access. We have access to live, move, and have our being in him. But guess what? We're going to close with this. Living, moving, and having your being in him must be a lifestyle. It has to be a lifestyle. Why? Because when living, moving, and having your being in him becomes a lifestyle, it calibrates you to expect the grace of God to manifest in your life. You're not up against something that's beyond you, hoping that it manifests, wishing that it manifests, wondering if it'll manifest. No, when you live a life that is totally dependent on God, when you live, move, and have your being in him, it calibrates your expectation in such a way where your confidence is that the grace is going to manifest while keeping the need for it before you. God's grace. It keeps the need for his divine influence and enablement before us. It's when God puts his super on our natural. People of God, it's dangerous to only need God when you need him. It's very, very dangerous to only need God when you need him. Acts chapter 17, verse 28 says, for in him we live, we move, and we have our being. Our existence, everything concerning our existence, has to flow in, through, and from him. That's the cheat code. Life is so much easier when we live, move, and have our being in him. We're not striving to access him because we're living in him. And now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all we can ask or think, according to the power that's at work on the inside of us. There's a divine measure of God on the inside of us that heaven partners with and gets things done that are beyond anything we can ask or think. Learn to live by the grace of God. Throw caution to the wind. Come out of fear. He has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and of a sound mind. And make up your mind today that from this moment forward, I'm coming to the end of me. And even my strength is going to rely on his strength. Because when he puts his super on our natural, we now become conduits for the supernatural. And this should not be situational. This is a realm that we should live in and live from on a daily basis. I'm done. I pray that tonight's 25-minute segment was a blessing to you and that it helped to edify you and to perfect you as a kingdom citizen. Listen, you may want to partner with us. We have 3 ways that you can do so. You can do it via Zelle, you can do it via Cash App, or PayPal. Those three ways should be on your screen now with all of our handles. Listen, James Holiday is good ground. Rivers Dallas is good ground. Every seed that you sow into me and into this ministry goes right back into kingdom work. We travel the nations. That costs. We partner with local entities that are doing philanthropic work, helping those who are underprivileged and less fortunate. That costs money. We partner with several other ministry endeavors, and we're committed to doing our part in helping them. That costs money. And everything that you sow helps us to uphold our end of the bargain, and also helps us do our part in advancing God's kingdom in the earth. Listen, we don't do ministry for money, but it does take money to do ministry. And with your seeds and your generosity, we're able to get that done in a very, very integral way that honors God and that continues to promote his kingdom in the earth. So, three ways to give: Zelle, Cash App, PayPal. Ask God, what do you want me to sow into this ministry? God, what seed do you want me to plant into this ministry? How do you want me to partner with this ministry? And be led of God. Nothing's too big, nothing's too small. And we thank God for you even considering uh, Wednesday Night Maximize for your edification on tonight. Also, don't forget every Saturday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, you are personally invited to our Early Risers virtual community. It's personal, it's edifying, it's interactive, and it's convenient. All are welcome to attend these free discipleship sessions where we are ministering the word of God, and we open up the floor where we dialogue over that word. We share testimonies, we share perspectives, we share the word of the Lord, and we really, really tap into the things of God as a virtual community. We've touched 15 states so far, and we believe in God to allow us to touch all 50 states on this platform. Would you be one? Would you be one that would get up early in the morning and seek the face of God? It said, and Jesus got up a great while before it was day, and he went into a solitary place and he spent time with the Father. Listen, would you be an early riser? I want to see your face in the place this Saturday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. The Zoom meeting information is at the bottom. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us at Rivers Dallas@gmail.com, and we'll make sure you get directions and instructions on how you can be a part of anything that we have going on. So with that being said, know that I love you, good people. We thank God for you, and we pray that you have a phenomenal rest of your evening.